What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Jumping on here to recap. The Steelers lost to the Buffalo Bills 26-7. Pretty non-competitive game into the second half. I would actually probably classify this one as one of the more disheartening slash frustrating regular season losses of the Mike Tomlin era. The Bills come into the Steel City with a bunch of backups. I think they actually had like close to 10 players yesterday that dressed that either weren't on their roster to start the season or are practice squad elevations. Still came in, really did whatever they needed to do offensively. The Steelers looked completely lost and out of sorts again offensively in this one. But, as we always do, kind of talk through some positives, some negatives. I've already went back and watched the Steelers offensive film, and I was just trying to like pawn off suffering through the defensive film once again this year. But going to try to get to that at some point today, have some film room stuff up. But just before we get started, if you guys could do me a favor, like the video, subscribe to the channel, drop me a comment. I'm just curious on like what everyone's like biggest complaint from yesterday's game was, because I know I have like a laundry list of things that really bugged me. But I know I've said this a couple times on this channel since we started doing the YouTube stuff, that I think the worst way to lose a football game is that when an opposing team comes into your own stadium, it basically just punks you out, for lack of a better description. And that's essentially what the Bills did yesterday. 249 rushing yards in this one. They had over 125 rushing yards before contact in this game. They dominated the line of scrimmage, and they did so without both of their starting tackles. I mean, several of their key pieces in this game didn't even play. Both their starting tackles, which are like Pro Bowl caliber players. They didn't have Dalton Kincaid, their top receiving threat. Even on the defensive side of the ball, they didn't have Ed Oliver, who's probably their best player in their front seven. So, really disheartening loss, especially given how the game got out of hand in the second half, even though the Steelers were technically in the lead going into halftime, which has been a familiar theme throughout the season, them coming out flat to start third quarters of the game, unable to sustain even like marginal leads and remain competitive for four quarters. I thought there were a couple good things that I would take away from this game. One of which is that Isaac Seumalo is playing arguably the best ball of like his Steelers career. It's been over a month since he actually allowed a pressure and pass protection. He's playing through a pec injury, man, but like you watch him play, like you would be hard pressed to figure out if it's even bothering him. A couple of the Steelers' best runs in the run game department yesterday were due to him getting out and delivering some key impact blocks. He had a really nice block in space on Matt Milano on a pin pull concept to the perimeter where he was able to put him on his back. And then I think him and Zach Frazier helped spring another, 10-plus yard gain later in the game as well. So I thought he was really good. I thought the offensive line did some nice things in pass protection and as an offensive line. I mean, they only allowed a handful of pressures in this game. I think 5 or 6 pressures allowed. But again, it's really difficult. They just do not have any sort of like passing game. And like you look at some of the numbers, they had a 42% rushing success rate in the first half. Getting over that 40% threshold is really key. That's where you want to be in the NFL. They were over that just barely. I wanted the numbers to be better. But I think that you have to also give credit to the Bills coaching staff in this one, because they just ran circles around Mike Tomlin and company. To be honest with you, they had some really clever game plans. Some of the things that Buffalo was doing to kind of stall out the Steelers' run game, create some disruption, was that they were utilizing some run blitzes even from the corners. So they were blitzing Christian Benford off the perimeter, trying to get into the backfield. We talked about them like hunting out negative plays in the run game, because they do give up some explosives, but they make some tackles in the backfield as well. They were really just like selling out to try to get into the backfield at all costs. A couple times they blitzed the corner, and it ended up creating some confusion on who was supposed to block who. And then also their second level players just showed absolutely no respect to the Steelers passing game. They knew that they weren't going to go play action. They knew that they weren't going to throw the ball to the intermediate area of the field, because they haven't done that all season. So as soon as the play was triggered and it looked like it was going to be a run, they're just flying downhill into the gap. I tweeted a play earlier today, but like there's the best example of this maybe is like they actually have like a decent call on. They try to run like same side dart, which all dart is like they bring the opposite tackle, which in this case was Troy Fautanu, try to lead him up through the B gap for the play side linebacker. He can't even get there because Pete allows the edge defender to cross his face. Troy can't get up into the hole to the linebacker, but then like the opposite, the will linebacker is screaming so hard to flow over top of Zach Frazier, he can't even get a hand on him. So it's just one of those things where like teams don't respect the Steelers' ability to throw the ball. They don't respect the quarterback. They don't respect the weapons. They don't respect the design. So it's really if you can slow down Jalen Warren, if you can slow down Kenneth Gainwell to get into the second level, and those guys creating on their own after contact, like this offense is really DOA, dead on arrival. I mean, you look at some of the numbers. They finished with a 28% rushing success rate. I mean, the Steelers have no shot to win a game with this current construction of offensive talent. If they can't run the football, they couldn't run the football, and their offense stalled out in the second half. Um, in terms of some other positives that I would say, like moving on to the defensive side of the ball, Nick Herbig had some splash production, 3 pressures, had like the one kind of weird, like forced fumble where James Cook hit it off his knee. That was big. Brandon Eccles had the interception early in the game. He kind of dropped out into his own coverage. Looks like Allen just didn't see him. He also had a really nice play on a pass breakup on Khalil Shakir on 3rd down, I believe, on an underneath throw over the middle of the field. So some decent stuff there. I thought that once the game kind of started unraveling for them was just when the Bills stopped turning the football over, to be honest with you. I thought Allen looked really unsettled early in the game. They didn't have a lot of stuff going through for them through the air, but the run game really propelled them to victory. And I think, it's really frustrating because like you go watching it live, even you could tell the Bills basically ran 2 plays. They ran 2 rushing concepts all day, and the Steelers they had no answers, for better or worse. They ran duo. Like duo is just like you're trying to generate as many double teams. Usually duo is a mic read, or if ever, depending on the alignment of the defense, like everybody kind of gets washed down. They ran duo over and over and over at the Steelers, particularly to the right side where like Y.A. Black was located, where T.J. Watt was located, where Joey Porter was located, and they just did it over and over again because the Steelers couldn't stop it. So you look at some of the numbers off the right end. The Bills ran the ball 17 times for 124 yards. They averaged 7.3 yards per attempt in that one. So, I mean, they had 4 runs of over 10 yards just off of those plays alone. They were able to handle TJ Watt with a blocking tight end pretty regularly in this one. We've actually talked about this a little bit on the podcast in recent weeks that he's been struggling as a run defender. And the Bills cleverly took some of the things that Chicago did to them last week, like we talked about in the preview, getting heavy and understanding where they needed to throw the ball, and also like getting creative with some of like forcing the Steelers to get in nickel and forcing Watt to play more as like a heavier end. And that's where some of the explosive plays have hit. And then the other rushing concept that they went to was just really one of their staples, which is just like mid-zone weak. The Steelers ran that a lot last year. Haven't seen as much of it this year. But mid-zone weak cutback lanes were just wide open. Watt was getting too far up the field. Guys were getting reached, or if they weren't getting reached, they were just putting their head down, not locating the back, and like staying gap sound. A couple of different instances where they had some backup defensive linemen in the game. I think you noticed the loss of Derek Harmon. Harmon, for how little impact he's had as a pass rusher this year, has been a pretty stout run defender in terms of like you're just not going to be able to move him off the ball or blow him off the ball consistently. I thought the Bills' interior really did that pretty much whenever they wanted to. Osiris Torrance, their center, their left guard, like those guys were able to create pretty good movement along the defensive line. Still really not sure. I've been looking for I'm definitely going to look for it when I watch the All-22, looking for the play where Cam Hayward was visibly upset about Josh Allen. Post-game presser said that Allen, I guess, like kneed him in the chest or the stomach to get him off of him. He took offense to that. Those guys were drawing back and forth, but Hayward really was a non-factor, similar to what TJ Watt. Those guys are really non-factors throughout this game. You look at Hayward, he ended up with I think like 6 or 7 tackles. A lot of those came in the fourth quarter, really after this game was ultimately decided. But, when your best players, they don't play like it. And that's been the case several different times this season. It's going to be tough. And I think that's really a big reason for the Steelers' struggles. I mean, they've definitely got some issues from a personnel and schematic standpoint. I mean, they couldn't even really get lined up appropriately, in my opinion, to where they looked gapped out or gapped sound against the Bills' run game. So I think TJ said it in his post-game press conference, but he was like, I don't know that I've ever seen, a plan of attack where like a team can just run the same play over and over again. We made adjustments. We just didn't have the answers. And that's kind of how it's felt like watching the Steelers throughout the season, is that, there have been a number of games this year where they've just gotten like blatantly out-coached, like out-schemed, and just unable to kind of make those mid-game adjustments like on the fly. Like even some of the times where they have like maybe good game plans coming into the game, other team will adjust, they can't adjust. But with the wind being what it was cold. Buffalo was down both their tackles. They were going to try to reduce the exposure to what those guys were going to be asked to do in pass protection. Watt only finished with one pressure in this game. They chipped him, double teamed him a handful of times. He didn't win whenever he was left one-on-one either. So, when you minimize the impact of those guys, this defense isn't very difficult to solve. And we've kind of talked about that too, where, if the Steelers pass rush, if they don't create a bunch of disruption, if they don't go out and get a bunch of sacks or, create turnovers, this defense you can move the ball on them pretty easily. I mean, they're 28th right now in rushing success rate. You look at some of the stuff that the Bills were able to do off play action, and Allen actually missed a couple throws. Like I said, wasn't comfortable early in the game, but off play action yesterday, Allen was 8 for 10, 72 yards. And then he had a handful of scrambles, and I thought you could see the Bills. I think it's easy to say that, Buffalo wanted this game more just because of, again, like how they just punked out the Steelers at the line of scrimmage in the run game department. But I think you could also just feel how much more it meant to them because they started pulling out some quarterback run stuff and some third and short goal line situations and things like that. Those moments are typically only when, things get really tight for Buffalo, or like they're playing Kansas City or they're in the playoffs. They really don't run Josh Allen by design as much as you would think they would or they could, just because you want to preserve the health of the quarterback long term. He'll still get out there and scramble, and he did that a couple times in this game too. But I just thought, got to have it situations. Allen made some incredible plays. The touchdown pass that he makes in the red zone where he pump fakes Brandon Echols and makes an alien type play. It's kind of similar to what we talked about with Justin Herbert in the preview, is that even if the quarterback doesn't necessarily play their best game, if you can make those 2 or 3 different plays to kind of swing the momentum or in a big moment like that, it makes a world of difference. And the Steelers just haven't had that, really, quite frankly, from the quarterback position in a while. Aaron Rodgers in this one struggled again. There were some really frustrating moments. I mean, Roman Wilson, he tries to throw an alert go ball to Roman. The ball's 5 yards off target. He beats his guy off press coverage. I think that was actually Christian Benford. It's a pretty good route, just nowhere near good enough throw. The sack fumble to open up the second half was just an absolute killer. Rodgers continues to struggle immensely whenever he's pressured. He's not under pressure a ton because of the way that he gets the ball out quickly, but he was under pressure on 5 dropbacks in this game. He went 0 for 4, didn't complete a single pass, and then he had the strip sack. So it's just one of those things where, it's just dead on arrival. Whenever he sees any flash of color, there's just no hope for their passing game. The passing game feels super restricted. He's 32nd in EPA per dropback this year on reps where he's been pressured, even though he's, again, hasn't been pressured a ton this year. But those just complete drive killers whenever guys are able to get into the backfield. In this game, I thought, you look at some of the plays, though, I've already went back and watched the film, and it's not like there are a bunch of guys running scot-free wide open either, really struggling to separate. Even when they were getting into some of their third down stuff, we talked about the 2-man coverages and things of that nature that they were doing. Buffalo was doing coming into the game. They deployed that a couple times, took away DK Metcalf. Teams are really doing a good job, minimizing his impact on the game. He's struggling a little bit right now versus getting off press coverage. Teams are really, cognizant of the different ways that Pittsburgh really likes to deploy him, depending on formational or alignment. So he's seen a lot of inside shade stuff to take away the slants that were kind of there early in the season. And then after that, using a safety to kind of cap things over the top. And what else is there? That's kind of what DK does. And they don't have another pitch. It continues to be mind-boggling that the Steelers cannot find any sort of targets or ways to get Pat Freiermuth the ball, given the state of the weaponry on this offense. It is just bizarre. One of the more bizarre things from a personnel standpoint. Jonnu Smith probably had one of the worst games I've ever seen, I think, from a tight end, from a blocking perspective. But again, it's difficult because at this stage of the season, when it's week 13, you got to start you got to start shifting the blame a little bit to the coaching staff, who continues to put players in the game to carry out responsibilities that they have proven, not just this season, but year over year over year, that they cannot execute. And, there's no more better encapsulation of that, really, to me, than the goal line sequence. It's 4th and 2. You've got, you're down 2 scores at that point. You absolutely have to punch the ball into the end zone. The Steelers try to run duo with Kenneth Gainwell. Again, I would probably have Jalen Warren in the game, but like neither here nor there. They're asking Jonnu to come down and wash down a defensive end, Gregory Rousseau, who, has a lot more play strength, a lot more just overall mass than he does. He predictably barely gets a hand on him. And then Gainwell's end up tackled into the backfield. So it's just one of those things where, why is he carrying out that responsibility? Like, why you have Darnell Washington, you have Spencer Anderson, you have two essentially 300+ pound tight ends that you could put on the line of scrimmage. On that exact play, Darnell Washington is running a route as if it's some sort of like RPO. Maybe Aaron Rodgers has the choice to like pull that back, throw it to the flat. Again, it's just one of those things where, super frustrating because everybody can see it. I mean, if you watch the Steelers game live, you know that all of those assignments like have not been within Jonnu's wheelhouse this year. And then the receiving game impact just hasn't been there either. Like he can't separate versus man coverage. He's essentially just a gadget guy, and those results just haven't been good enough to warrant him getting that much playing time. Darnell really didn't get involved in this game in the passing game till late in the second half. I think he had one play over the middle, I think in the fourth quarter when the game was kind of already over with at that point. But no production really from the wide receivers or from the passing game in general in this one. And the Steelers just couldn't get the ball back. The time of possession, the Bills held the ball for 42 of the 60 minutes of game time. That's just pretty bizarre, but that's what happens, when you can't get off the field and you allow the opposing team to just run the ball at will. I mean, the Bills finished with a 47% rushing success rate in this one, throughout the game, 4 quarters. The Steelers knew what was coming, couldn't stop it. Another couple curious decisions I felt like, in my opinion, were, it's 16-7, I believe, third quarter. I think it's their second drive of the third quarter. Maybe there's 8 minutes left to go. But it's a 3rd and 9 play. I thought that Rodgers checked to a run, a perimeter run, but apparently it was a designed run. Maybe he was just checking the side, which direction the run was going into. But basically they're running outside zone, because the Bills are in a double mug presentation and they are blitzing up the middle. Those perimeter runs are a good answer to teams that like to mug up the middle. But it's one of those things where if you're going to run the ball on 3rd and 9, that is you're trying to set yourself up for a manageable 4th down opportunity to potentially go for it. The Steelers, Gainwell ends up getting out to the perimeter. The reason why you like these runs is because there's no second level of the defense. Gainwell gets out to the perimeter. Calvin Austin kind of gets blown up at the point of attack. He's not a blocker. You could potentially have Skoranek in the game there, but then it's probably going to tip the defense off that you're probably running the ball because he's not really a guy that they throw the ball to when he's in there. And then, Tomlin elects to punt on 4th and 1, which is one of those things where, analytics will tell you you need to go for it there. It's 4th and 1. You're already down 2 scores. The Bills get the ball back. They go 15 plays, 83 yards. They burn 8 minutes of clock. I think at the point, there was a point in time where Tony Romo, who was abysmal in this game, said that I think the Steelers offense went 30 minutes without possessing the ball. I don't know if this was that point or not, but they burned off 8 minutes of clock and they go to score a touchdown. And at that point, the ball game's over. So just there's a lot of really frustrating elements to this game from a coaching perspective, from an execution perspective. You just don't have a lot of players playing really high level ball right now. It kind of goes back to what John and I really talked about in last week's podcast episode, where we kind of did a redo or a do-over of the Steelers offseason last year. And now that we're into December, I mean, there is no debate. The Steelers had a catastrophic offseason this past year. I mean, I was fairly low on a bunch of their moves, or at least skeptical on a lot of the things that they were doing. But so many of their decisions, I mean, it's ended up so much worse than I think anyone, including myself, could have even imagined. From all the different things that they did, extending TJ Watt, given his lack of production this year, was just, and the clear decline that we saw last season was just a move that didn't need to happen. Not just for the short term, but ignoring some of the advantages that it would have had to moving on and acquiring some draft capital and using those resources to build up the next stage of the team, to investing in a bunch of older players, trying to go out and get guys that are well into their 30s, willingly going and getting older this offseason was just a bizarre approach. The trading a second round pick for DK Metcalf, someone that you clearly can't utilize. He's on pace to, be like barely over like 800 receiving yards, the worst year of his career by far. And definitely the quarterback play is a, component of that. But the Steelers chose to run it back with Arthur Smith. They chose to bring in Aaron Rodgers and Mason Rudolph. That was their preferred plan at quarterback this year. And just bizarre. Like Rodgers has been like largely the player that he's been this year since 2022, like his last year with the Packers. And the fact that that was the, if you were going to go for it, go get a bunch, like go get willingly older, be the second oldest team in the NFL and do all these different things, and then hitch your wagon to a quarterback that's, past his prime, and you can't even maximize the little bit of things that he still does well. Just mind-boggling, man. Like from everything from the draft to free agency, the trades, the contract extensions, just abysmal, to be honest. The retaining of Mike Tomlin, that was something we talked about in the podcast as well. You look at all of these first-year coaches, having success and like leading their teams like from, outside the playoffs last year, it back into the playoffs this year. You look at like what Vrabel has done with the Pats. Liam Cohen's got the Jags in the playoffs. Ben Johnson's got the Bears as the freaking 1 seed in the NFC. Was one of those unique years to where like there were a bunch of like really good head coach candidates, and the Steelers elected to run it back with the same head coach, same defensive coordinator, same offensive coordinator. It's crazy to me. But John and I talked about that a lot in the podcast episode for last week. So if you're a frustrated Steelers fan, you want to hear some more like in-depth conversation with that. That's available for you. The link to become a channel member is in the description of this video. It's $4 a month, no long-term commitment. John and I have been recording for, over an hour and a half, whatever, every single week. And it's been a lot of fun to kind of vent some frustrations out and, talk through the good, bad, and different, everything that is to be discussed with this team. I guess the good news or the bad news, depending on how you look at it, is that no one really actually wants to win the AFC North. The Steelers are 6-6 now, but so are the Baltimore Ravens. They just blew a home game to the Cincinnati Bengals. Pittsburgh has to go on the road to travel to face off with the Ravens this Sunday to really determine who's going to be in the driver's seat for the AFC North in a home playoff game. So, that is, I guess, depending on how you look at it, it could be a good thing. I still think at this point in the season, you might as well just continue to try to hammer things out until you get out of the race. But it's very clear at this point in the year that like this just isn't a good football team, man. Like they don't have answers. I don't think that there are like pivot points coming. And it's really just, for me, continues to be about trying to evaluate the young talent on the team who's going to be here for the next like stage of this rebuild. Even though, I don't necessarily think that there are like wholesale changes, maybe that like people, including myself, would like to see on the team. But got a lot of NFL draft content coming out as well. Been writing some stuff for SteelersNow.com. And also going to do some film room stuff. I think I'm going to do something on Oregon quarterback Dante Moore if I get time today. So, yeah, definitely let me know what you guys think of the video. Feel free to express your frustrations. You could take it out on me. You can write about, whatever's frustrating you most with the team. But yeah, definitely a dark place. The Steelers are now 6-11 in their last 17 games. Pretty crazy. So I will check you guys very soon. Peace and love.